Okay, let's jump into it. So thank you all for coming along to this webinar. It's Mastering Tax Research using ChatGPT. So I'm the presenter, Daniel van der Heyden. So I'm a chartered accountant and tax agent. I've been doing this for a long time. Love technology. Been using AI for a long time now. So I thought I'd share my knowledge with you. What are we going to cover today? So we're going to look at a few things. So we're going to look at how AI is transforming the way we work. The future of accounting. We're going to look at how we use ChatGPT for tax research. We're going to look at the kind of common pitfalls and limitations. We're going to quickly touch on what chatbots you can use, and then we're going to go into a live demo. We'll go through a few case scenarios. Before we jump into that, though, so I am trying out this as a webinar platform, so it's a little bit new to me. You can drop in some questions, right, in the chat. So you should be able to see the chats either off to the side or down below. So chuck in questions as we go, and we'll address those at the end. Maybe if someone wants to give me like some thumbs up or something, just to see if that's all working. Cool. All right. So how is AI transforming the way we work? It's not just accountants that have been impacted by this. It's many other industries. So it's not just affecting us, it's affecting other people and how they work. Okay. So what it's really doing is it's automating a lot of what we do. Okay. So AI can analyze a lot of information and very quickly, right? So something that we can't do. Even using Google, obviously we can get a lot of information quickly, but it still takes time to go through that all. Okay, ChatGPT and other AI tools can give that data to you in easy to understand kind of words, so that we can make decisions quicker. Where it is now, it's more of a research assistant. So I'm sure there will be things to come in the future, but right now, the way I see it is it's a research assistant, right? So it helps filter through all that information and provide you with a starting point to kind of dig in further and to kind of apply your professional judgment. So it's not a replacement. Okay, it's not a replacement to what we do as accountants. It supplements it. It helps us. Okay, so it helps us get information quicker and hopefully provide information and advice to our clients much quicker. It also helps support us with compliance. So obviously when you do tax research, typically you're looking at tax rulings, you look at legislation, you're looking at case studies through whatever platform you use. With AI, with chatbots, you can get that information quickly, right? So not just looking at each thing individually, it gives you everything in one go. So it can help you become better with compliance because you get everything at your fingertips. So AI is a powerful research tool, but it works best when combined with your professional judgment. So the stuff you already know. So this is just complementing what you already do and what you already know. So what is the future of accounting? So this is my opinion on what I think it's happening or where it's heading. So in my opinion, AI won't replace us. It's just going to make our jobs more efficient, right? You still need to know what you're doing. So I don't know if anyone's ever tried it, trying to do app development. I've tried to do it with ChatGPT. And it gives you the code and shows you how to do it all. But trying to problem solve and to understand what's going on, it's really hard. So you still need to know what you're doing. I don't know if any of you remember the whole cloud transition, going from server-based accounting software through to the cloud. Seems like a lifetime ago now. But we were told back then that our jobs are going to be redundant and that we're going to have to find new things to do. But what actually happened was it changed the way we work. Things like bank feeds, things like decks that read, receipts. It definitely changed it, but there was still just as much work as ever. So in my opinion, AI is just the next phase to that. Okay. So the way it works now, in my opinion, is it's more of like a Google 2.0. So rather than going and doing all that research individually, it gives you everything in one hit, and then you can process that information. I still use Google, right? So I still want to verify what ChatGPT and whatever chatbot you use is saying is correct. So still go and do your independent verification and use your professional judgment, but it will help speed that up. So the future, in my opinion, it's likely to replace those repetitive tasks. So much like bank feeds, reduce the need to input a bank statement into MYB or Xero. It was there ready for you just to reconcile. And things like Dext, rather than keying in invoices and receipts, it did all the data extraction for you and put it straight into Xero. So where does it leave us? Just like with the advent of cloud, probably even from paper-based to computers, there's always going to be jobs. It's just the way it's done is different. Okay, so in my opinion, it's going to be very much about building relationships with clients. So clients will want to talk to someone, see someone, interact with someone that is passionate about their business, just as passionate as them about it. And so I really think that's where we're heading with accounting. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of it all. So understanding ChatGPT for tax research. So again, ChatGPT doesn't need to be the tool. You can choose whatever tool you want. Okay. Obviously, we're focusing on ChatGPT in this session. So how does it help? Like I said before, more generally, it gives you a lot of information very quickly. So it's able to go and look at all the tax rulings, tax law, case scenarios, whatever. It gives it all in one place and very quickly, because it can process that information much quicker than we can as humans. So what can it do? It can definitely summarize tax rulings. It can do your initial research. It can actually do calculations, but be wary of that. And it can suggest other areas to explore. Okay, so it can give you all those researches and things like that. Okay, but what it can't do is provide legally binding advice, so you wouldn't want it to at least, or apply theory to a practical scenario. So it kind of can, but ultimately, at the end of the day, as an accountant, you need to be able to explain whatever the advice is to your client. You need to be able to understand what it affects, right? So if you just take what ChatGPT or any other AI tool does and say, this is what you need to do, but don't actually understand it, you're not providing value to your client, really, because they can do the same thing, right? But also, like, how does it affect the tax return? How does it affect the value of the business, or like how much money they're worth? So you need to not just look at this little thing in isolation, like how does it impact everything else? So AI is a research assistant, not the decision maker. So the way I like to see it is, think of when you're say a manager in an accounting firm, right? You're not always doing all the work. You'll often give work to your junior accountants. Okay, so they'll go do the research. They'll go do all the calculations. They'll do the tax returns. But you don't just take what they say as gospel. Ultimately, you're the decision maker. So you review the work. You're applying your professional judgment to it. Okay, so rather than it being a person you're giving it to, in this case, it's a chatbot. So take the same kind of approach. Okay, so it's done the research. It's done whatever the task is you've assigned it, but you still need to apply your professional judgment to it. Common pitfalls, as great as AI is, it can make mistakes. So misinformation, hallucinations, it can do some really weird stuff. It's getting better, and it's got better over the last, 2 or 3 years. It's really taken off, but it still gets things wrong. And hopefully we can see that in these case studies that we're doing. Probably not. Now I'm doing it live, we'll probably do it all correctly, but it can make mistakes. So it can be biased, especially depending on the prompts you give it. It could give you something based off your thinking rather than being more objective. So you've got to kind of be aware of that. And it can use outdated data. So every chatbot's different. Okay, so in ChatGPT, the data, I think last I heard it was like September 24 wasn't up to date till, I could be wrong, could be updated now. But I still find that sometimes it uses 24 financial year rather than 25 when I ask it questions. And sometimes it gives me links to, especially the ATO. I think the ATO done a lot of updates on the website. It still gives me old links that don't exist anymore, so that I have to use Google to go and find it. So don't always trust it. So handling mistakes. So again, when you take in that example or that that analogy of giving work to your junior accountant to do, it's the same thing with this, right? So you've got to fact check. You've got to use your professional skills, your professional judgment to whatever has been applied here. And much like you'd talk to a junior accountant, right? You'd ask them questions, you might make them go away and do a little bit more research, or like, give them some more pointers and say, hey, go and look at this, or look at this tax ruling, or have a think about, this scenario. You can do the same with ChatGPT. So I very much treat it like a junior accountant in this kind of sense, and ask it more questions. Don't just take what it says as gospel. You can query it, right? Just like you'd talk to a person. So calculations aren't its strong suit. It can get the calculations wrong. It generally gets the calculations itself right. So 1 + 1 knows it equals 2, right? But where it can make mistakes, especially in tax, it can leave things out of a formula. So, for example, I was testing on FBT. That was a little while ago. So it got a lot of the calculations right based off what it knew on FBT. Obviously, it told it like the value and all that kind of stuff, but it missed the gross up. So it got the calculation wrong. And so I had to query and go, hey, you forgot about the gross up. Can you consider this? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay, here's the updated calculation. But even if the calculation looks correct, I still check it. So I'll still chuck it into Excel and do the calculation myself. And then you've got ethical considerations. So it's kind of like touching on what I said before around, if you get advice from ChatGPT or whatever tool you use, and then just give it to your client, I don't know if that's really ethical, right? Because you don't actually understand the advice, and if you don't understand the advice, you probably don't know how that interacts with other aspects of that person's finances or business or whatever it is. So, you need to consider that. You still have professional obligations, right? You CA, CPA, tax agent. You still need to have those ethical considerations and still give actual advice that clients can rely on. So another question, what chatbot should you use? So there's a million of them out there now. Well, I don't know about a million, but there's a lot. Okay, so ChatGPT being kind of the earliest one out there. It's kind of why I use it. It was the first one I used, and I know how to use it. I've tried everything else, but ChatGPT does what I want it to do. It's pretty good with research, and it gives me pretty coherent, advice or whatever it is that I ask it to do. You kind of got others out there, Claude. So Claude, I've had to play around with it. It's really good with research. You kind of got Copilot, which is Microsoft, which is really good at kind of real-time information. Where ChatGPT can be a little bit behind the times in terms of where its data is up to. Copilot often has the real-time, data. Then you kind of got like Google. They have Gemini and Notebook, and they all serve different purposes, right? So obviously each one has a subscription. The paid version is always better. So you don't want to pay for a million subscriptions. So if I were you, I would go and test them all. Often they have free trials. Go do the free trials and see what works best for you. There's no right or wrong answer. All right, let's go and take a look at ChatGPT in action. So I've got 3 scenarios here, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with a prompt, okay? So I know people get confused about what a prompt is. Again, going back to that junior accountant analogy, basically when you want them to do something, you set the expectation. You say, this is the scope of whatever the thing is you're doing, and here's the expectation of that, okay? So a prompt in AI is simply just doing that, right? So rather than saying it to a person, you tell it to a chatbot. You need to be specific. It needs to be easy to understand, and you need to set those expectations. So this is the prompt I use when I do my research. So there are tricks and other things. So we're not going to dive into like everything about, say, ChatGPT, but it does have memories and you can prompt it in the settings and things like that. So it can do a lot of the stuff without you having to prompt it every time. But for simplicity, and sometimes it gets a bit confused, especially if you talk about a lot of different things. So I use this prompt to start my new questions or research. Okay. So basically saying, I'm the tax agent, there's a tax problem that requires research, you're my assistant, you're going to do initial research and whatnot, and that, summarize the findings and include references to the sources. And so I'll use that prompt shortly. So that's kind of the first step, okay? And then after that, we're going to ask it questions. So I will skip to the first case study, and then I'll do this case study along with that initial prompt at the same time. So the first case study is GST research. So basically a business owner wants to purchase a motor vehicle. It's worth 77K, and he wants to buy it in his company. There's obviously a lot of considerations there, okay? So I can think of a few. You guys probably can think of a few as well. So they want to know how much of the GST credit they can claim, okay? So obviously want a refund. And the business owner estimates the vehicle will be used 70% for business. Okay, so we're ignoring everything else at this stage. We're ignoring income tax, we're ignoring FBT, and just focusing in on the GST side of things. And so I've got a little prompt here. So it's basically restating what the scenario is, right? In such a way that that ChatGPT can give us an answer. Okay, so let's jump over into ChatGPT. So I'm going to give it the initial prompt. So rather than type it out, I'm just going to copy and paste it. So I've got it on my other screen over here. So cool. So now it's saying cool. It basically understands what it's going to do here. So now I've done that, I can do the prompt for case study 1. Again, I just copied and pasted it. Often when you get kind of a question like that, you would create like a summary of what the problem is, right? Even if you're not using ChatGPT, if you're just Googling it, for example, you'd still go and write out what the problem is so you can do the research. And so that's effectively what this prompt is. It's the simple, basically the problem and what you want done. So I'm going to hit OK. So now it's going to go. Okay, so I don't know about other tools, but ChatGPT often does this where it gives you a couple of responses and you select the one you like the most. So yeah, just take a read through it. It doesn't really matter too much. I'm just going to choose this one. Okay. So we can see here, it said, okay, when a car purchases it, 77 grand, we've got an estimate 70%. Therefore, based on the car limit for 2024, you can claim 1/11th for the GST. So in the 6,000, 70% business usage means you can claim 70% of that GST credit. So the total amount they can claim is 4,334. And then it gives us a couple other considerations. So luxury car tax, FBT, awesome. That's actually really good. So what we also need to do, let's assume we actually want to do for the 2025 financial year. So this is when we can start querying more. Okay. So let me just type this out. Currently in the 2025 financial year is, oops, spelling. It doesn't care about the spelling. It's pretty good at actually picking up what you're trying to say. So just prompting it. So that was the 2024 car limit. So cool. To 2025, different. So it's a slightly different calculation. Okay, cool. So then it's still touching on other aspects. Okay. So we've got fuel efficient vehicles, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's fine. So this is obviously assuming that this is a non-commercial vehicle. It's a car, 70% business usage. So we can continue prompting it if we want, right? What if this was a commercial vehicle? Excuse my spelling. I swear it's got worse ever since AI because it understands what you're saying. That can say here. Cool. So what if it's a commercial vehicle? So then it talks about the treatment for GST. Okay. So no car limit applies, but it's saying business usage still applies. So, okay, cool. And so then it gives us a little bit of context around how to tell if it's a commercial vehicle, which is awesome. And then it gives us an example of how much GST credit you can claim. And it's even give us the references. So I often find that the ChatGPT doesn't always work. So yeah, I often have to ask it for the URL, and then I can go and have a look and see if it is correct. Cool. And then the other thing is, how do we justify the 70% business usage? Everyone probably knows this, but just want to demonstrate how we kind of build on what the initial prompt was. Again, excuse my spelling. So now it's talking about substantiation. Okay, I love it. Gold standard. Using a logbook. So it tells us how it should be kept, how long, what you need to include. So cool. Even telling us not what to do. So this is really good. No guesstimates, whatever it is. So, and there's given us links to, again, to the tax rulings and practice guides and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Love it. It's even speaking in my language. So, because I can't see those URLs, it's not letting me. Okay. It's just letting me respond to it. I say, can you please? I'm always polite to AI. You never know what's going to happen in the future. the URLs for the tax rulings, etc. Okay. So it's giving me the actual, hopefully, there we go. It's giving me the actual URLs. So let's just double check to see if this URL is still working. And we can see it still works. So like I say, sometimes the URL is not correct. So you might have to go do your own research. Okay, so from there, obviously ChatGPT has given us a bunch of research and some solutions, right? So the next step I like to take is actually put it into a document, okay? So what I do is I have a document that's just got the problem, the research, and then the solution, okay? So here's the problem. So this is basically your prompt, right, for your ChatGPT. So plug that in. It gives you the research. So again, don't just take the research as gospel. Read through it, understand it, go and verify it, go Google it, whatever it is you do, okay? So you can read through all of this stuff and verify that it is correct. And again, it's got references here, so we can go and look at those things as well. And then we've got the solution. So again, ChatGPT created this solution, but you still need to double check it's correct. So I would be chucking this table into Excel and double checking that my calculations match what ChatGPT is saying. If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, cool. I'd go back to ChatGPT and question that. So again, this is great to have, but the actual real key to this is understanding. Okay, so don't just say, "Hey, yeah, you can claim $4,433.80 of GST." Actually, understand the calculation, understand why and how it came up with that number. Okay, that's when you can actually add value to your clients. Cool. So, coming back to the case studies. So that was the GST one. Obviously, we ignored a lot of things, FBT, income tax, and everything like that. But you can build on top of that. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So income tax research. So now we've looked at the GST. We're happy with that. What are we going to do for income tax purposes? So in this case, I've assumed, hopefully by the time we've done the tax return, you've got your logbook, you've got a bit more information about the vehicle. So we're saying it's a non-commercial vehicle. So it's a car. So we definitely need to have, we've got the car limit and we've got the business usage. And so the prompt here is, rather than starting from scratch, because we're not going to use a new chat, we're going to use the same chat and just build on it. Okay, so it's got all the information there. There's no point starting a new chat and whatever. We can do the scenario in the one chat. So we've solved the problem. So basically, what is the income tax implications for this purchase? So again, I've got my little prompt over on my other screen here, and we're going to switch it back over to ChatGPT. Okay, so I'm just going to paste my prompt in, and let's see how it goes. We'll see if it throws up an error. It did throw up an error when I did it earlier. It's probably going to be correct now. So cool, it's picked up its 2025 financial year because we told it in the GST, and then it's gone through and determined what is depreciable. Okay, so you can see because it's a non-commercial vehicle, it exceeds the car limit, so we can't use the whole car limit, which is absolutely, the whole purchase value. We can only use the car limit for depreciation. So that's it's picked that up all correctly. Again, if you're not sure, go and do the research. Look at the tax rulings. Look at the ATO website. You'll be able to get that information there or verify that information there. So what it's done here is the depreciation it's done is that just done, it's just done straight line by the looks of it. And is it straight line? Diminishing. Okay. So it's saying we've got diminishing in prime cost, straight line depreciation, and it's showing us the calculations here. Okay. So subsequent years, so that's your decline in value. So immediate write-off, awesome. So it's considered that. Obviously, it's over the threshold, therefore it doesn't apply. But it's only done those two. It hasn't looked at small business pools. So I'm just going to ask it that question. So you can see here. Cool. This is a great question. Thank you, ChatGPT. And so now it's going through the requirements for the small business pool, the small, whatnot. So $10 million, simplified depreciation rules, etc., etc. And then it shows the calculations, still the 70% of the car limit itself, and then being in the first year 15%, and subsequent years 30% on the written down value. Okay, so it's showing the year 2 depreciation and then so on. And then it's considering the instant write-off. So no, because it's above the threshold and whatnot. So then it's given me the summary. And then again, all the references. So this is perfect. So I can go and verify what it's done is correct. Okay. So yeah, obviously we've built on from the GST into the income tax for this same scenario. And this is exactly the way you can do it. It's going to save you time rather than have to do these crazy prompts every time. If it's the same scenario, you can build on it. Okay. And again, I like to chuck it into a document that outlines the same thing. We've got the problem, we've got our research. So again, verify this is all correct. And it should have key considerations. It doesn't have my references in this one. So I did do this earlier. Obviously, it's got references here. So I can always copy all this over from ChatGPT. So I just chucked in my references. I love the references because I always go and verify everything is correct. And then the solution. Okay. So this way it's simplified depreciation rules, small business pools. And it talks about the depreciation, both first year and then what you do in subsequent years. So again, much like the GST, make sure you understand what the research is saying and what the solution actually is, and double check those calculations. But doing that will save you a lot more time than going to do the research. Obviously, if this is the first time you've seen this, it's going to cut down your learning and your research time a bucket load. And probably after a few goes, you'll know the rules around this, right? The other thing I should say is never assume you know what the rules are, because the rules do change. The car limit changes every year. A lot of things change, especially nowadays. So I always do the research, even if I know the question. Or the answer to the question, sorry. All right. So, like I said, we built on that scenario, which is awesome. Okay. It reduces our time, not just in terms of each one of those different kinds of the GST and the income tax, but because it was the same scenario, we didn't have to redo everything all over again. So that really streamlined the way we do it. And then let's look at case study 3. So this is what I do for fun. So this is how sad I am. So I like to learn new things all the time. So when I hear about something I haven't done or had to do before, or maybe it's something I hadn't considered before, I like to go and do the research. Okay, so back in the day, I would go through and try and understand, legalese, trying to understand the legislation, trying to understand the tax ruling, trying to understand case scenarios from wherever you're getting them from. Okay, now you don't need to do all that. Now you can just chuck it through ChatGPT and get it to summarize it for you. Okay, so I've pulled out a tax ruling here, and it's something that I've been using for years now, but I think it's quite a good example because this question comes up a lot. So I found a tax ruling that someone's like, hey, there's this tax ruling, might summarize it, or they might talk about an article or whatever it is. And so I wanted to summarize it so I can understand it. Okay. So what I do here is this isn't necessarily a problem for a client. It's me trying to understand more about tax, because tax is so vast, right? And if you did all the research yourself and try to read everything, you'll never get through it all, right? And what I find with tax is you don't need to know everything. You need to know there's issues, and you need to know how to research those issues, which is very much what we're doing here. And so as part of that, if I see something that I haven't seen before or haven't considered before, I'll go and get ChatGPT to summarize it for me. So in this case, we've got a tax ruling, TR 2004/4, and I want it to give it to me in simple terms, focusing on the impact on, in this case, rental property deductions. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with 2004/4, but it's to do with interest on property, okay, and the deductibility of that. So I'm going to switch back over to ChatGPT here. Okay, so I'm done with this chat. So I'm just going to create a new one over here. Okay, so let me go back to my prompt over here on my other screen. So it can go and do the research and find the URL or the tax ruling. Sometimes it can get a bit messy. So I typically just download what I can and upload it. I find it more reliable. I'm not saying it isn't great, it can do it, but I find it more reliable if you actually go and actually get the, say, tax ruling in this case and upload it. So now I'm going to hit enter. Doesn't like me. Okay, cool. Takes a little while to upload. And so what it's doing now is reading through the tax ruling. Okay, so you can see it's giving me a summary. So it explains interest on loans, that the interest on loans is deductible before rental property starts earning income. Okay, so this is a key thing because people always get confused about when certain deductions are applicable for rental properties, especially now with the ATO scrutiny on rental properties. So this is a good one to start, good one to learn. Okay, and so it basically gives me the key points. So you can claim interest deductions. Okay, and so you got to look at a few things. Generally intended to be rental income, i.e., not a holiday home. Okay, or your main residence. Interest isn't too soon because anything kind of legislation and tax-wise is always vague, so you need to read between the lines, or at least come up with your own conclusion. Actively working, so it could be renovated or whatever it is, being built potentially. And yeah, it's not isn't unreasonably long. Again, legislation loves the stuff. The courts love this really vague kind of wording. So again, you need to not necessarily read between the lines, but you need to justify everything you do. But again, this gives us a really good summary so that when we go to do the next rental property and someone says, hey, I bought it, 6 months ago or 3 months ago, I renovated it, and now I'm going to rent it out. What expenses can I deduct? Then you can talk through it, right? So you can go, okay, interest is deductible if you can prove that it was genuine. But things like the renovation costs or whatever other costs typically aren't. Okay, so it's obviously given us a lot of things here. So we can then still ask it questions, right? So I'll ask it questions. So I'm like, what about other expenses such as water and can't spell. Still can't spell it. Council rates. Okay, so then I can dig in a bit more. I don't know what's going on there. Let's just refresh that. It didn't like me for some reason. Let's try that again. Let's give that a go. So you kind of get a bit funny sometimes, but cool. So it's saying cool 204/4 focuses on interest, but then it says, it gives them the ATO position in plain English. Awesome, love it. So usually claim. Okay. So I'd be looking into this a bit more. Okay, so the key here is generally available for rent. Okay, so you can start asking it questions and start digging in. Again, I'm not so sure that's correct, so I'm going to go and look into that a bit more. You know what I mean? So it gives you more information. And in this case, this is simply for your learning, not necessarily for for a client problem. Might be a client problem in the future. Anyway, that's just me. I like to nerd out on this stuff. So those are the three scenarios, right? So obviously we touched on GST, we touched on income tax. So those are client-specific questions or problems, and we just built on those, right? So we built on top of the GST into the income tax because it's the same scenario. So you don't have to start from scratch every time. And then if you just, if you like reading about tax law and legislation and stuff for fun, you can do something like this. Okay. Again, like I wouldn't expect anyone, I don't expect for myself to know everything about tax, but I expect to be able to spot problems and figure it out. So I'll put through a tax ruling, for example, and I'm like, okay, cool. I kind of know I might not know the ins and outs of it, but I know there's something there. So when I see a set of accounts and there's like, I might be like, oh yeah, that's right. Tax ruling 2004/4 that said something about interest on, deductibility of interest on rental properties. I should go back to that. I might not even remember the tax ruling number, but I'm like, I remember there's a tax ruling. So, it's something that helps with your learnings, in my opinion. Tips and tricks. So, top research tips with AI. So this applies to all tools, right? Not just ChatGPT. So like I say, start with the problem, not the tool, okay? The problem is what we're looking to solve. Doesn't matter how you solve it. You could still go back to the books if you want to and read through it. You can use Google. What I'm saying here is let's take it to the next level. Take it to the next level and use AI. Tip 2, always cross-check ChatGPT. Okay, so don't take it for gospel. Go and do the research and reading yourself. Use it as simply a way to summarize everything and then go and look into it further. Okay, it might give you the answers correctly, and it is getting better every day, but still you need to apply professional judgment. Okay, be specific in your queries. Okay, if you're kind of broad about it, it doesn't always work well. So that's why I kind of started with that prompt saying, basically I'm a tax agent and then you're helping me with tax research. And then I got it even more specific with the problems. Okay, if you're too broad, it doesn't always work. It can work if you're just playing around and want to just learn new things. But if you're talking about a problem to solve, then get specific. One thing, I guess we touched on this in case study 3. Use AI to summarize long documents, okay? But like I say, always verify for accuracy. Like I was talking about the other expenses. Wasn't quite sure it was correct, but it did talk about generally available for rent. So I'm like, okay, maybe it is correct, but I'm going to go and look into that more, okay? So make sure that you're, again, applying that professional judgment and doing your own research as well. Yeah, you're still doing research, but remember the research time is cut down, especially if you ask ChatGPT to give you the references so you can go and verify that by looking at it yourself. Like I said, they always ask for the sources. Don't assume AI generated answers are factually supported. That is very true, unfortunately. I have seen cases where I haven't got specific enough in terms of the prompts. But also not asking for things like sources, right? And it gives me these random answers. And so be very aware of that. So that's why being specific and asking for those sources is very important. Always check the calculations. So like I said, AI can calculate 1 + 1, but sometimes it'll leave things out of the formula. So always double check it. And I always do it in Excel. Love Excel. I don't use calculators much nowadays. So you can see everything there. And the big thing is, this is very, very important, okay? Much like you can't transmit tax file numbers over email, apply that same logic to ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you're using, okay? So if you're doing actual client work, be very careful with their sensitive information, okay? Don't upload whole tax returns. Definitely don't let the name and address and phone numbers and definitely tax file numbers be available for these tools to see. So either redact it or better still, put a summary into an Excel spreadsheet, okay, and then upload that. So then it's completely, de-identified, I guess. So be very cautious of that because we still have professional obligations, both with our industry bodies, CA, CPA, but also the tax practitioners board. So strategies to maximize AI for tax research. Okay, so like with any new skill, it takes a while to get used to, right? So I remember when I started learning Excel way back when, very long time ago now, that I would still use a calculator, and then I had to force myself to use Excel, even if it was a small, calculation. I forced myself to use Excel, so then I got used to it, and it become much quicker. So it's the same here. So rather than going to say Google or Bing or whatever you use, go straight into your ChatGPT or whatever your preferred app is, and then ask the question there. Okay, and you can build on top of that. Always ask additional questions. Just don't just take the first answer. So you'll see what I did there with asking additional questions. So I know we didn't go deep into it. So with that case scenario 1 and 2, we could have dived into FBT and all those kinds of things, right? So there's other areas we could have dived into as well, but also just querying what it says. If it's not right or you're not sure, like I say, do your research, but you can also query the chatbot, right, and see if it gives you any additional resources or helps you clarify the answer. And lastly, it is a skill, so right, and skills take time to learn. So you'll see with any new skill, whatever it is, Excel, AI, even using something like Xero, right? There's always like a slow burn, right? So it takes you forever, and the results aren't the greatest, and then you'll slowly increase, and then next thing, it's much quicker. So I can't remember the timeline. There was some timelines around it. I can't remember what it was. But basically, the more you practice on the one thing, whatever it is, playing the guitar, learning ChatGPT, there is a point where it becomes easier very quickly. So take the time. It might be frustrating, but it'll be worth it in the long run. So Q&A. I see a few questions here. So let's go through those questions. Feel free to type in some more, and we can go through those. So looking at my other screen, if you've seen the side of my head, is verifying the data that ChatGPT creates using another AI tool a good idea, or is it a case of blindly in the blind? For example, Gemini to cross-check ChatGPT. No, that is a good idea. I do that sometimes. Again, I still wouldn't trust it all. I'd still do my own research, right? So I'd still get the tax rulings or whatever it is and go into that tax ruling and double check what it's saying is correct. So you definitely can, and it might throw out things that you didn't consider, but still apply your professional judgment. Okay. Yeah, thanks. So tiny habits. Tiny habits. 1% better each day. That is correct. Does anyone else? Oh, that's all the questions I've got. Does anyone else have any questions? Don't be shy. All right. Is it possible to get ChatGPT to only look at certain reference sources, such as ato.gov.au, and provide an answer? Yeah, so it's all about your prompts, right? So if you want it to only look at certain things, as long as you prompt it to do so, okay? So, so like, if you prompt it to do so, then it will do that. It might start looking, but you kind of keep it on track. So again, think of that junior accountant kind of scenario, right? You know what it's like when you learn, like remember being the junior accountant, you think you know lots of things, you go off on all these tangents, right? Any AI tool can do the same kind of thing. So it's bringing it back to what it needs to focus on. So, yep, you can definitely get it to do that using prompts, but you might have to bring it back into line. I don't really like that word, but yeah, you might have to bring it back into line. Yeah, and so is that a good idea to ensure the reference is reliable? So, I mean, I guess the beauty of ChatGPT and other AI tools, right, rather than just focusing on one thing at a time, you can do that using Google, right? It kind of gets all the information you need. So, so it can, I prefer it to go and look at the tax rulings and the tax legislation, and even some other accounting firms or whatnot have pretty handy blogs that can summarize things really well. Okay, so as long as you're getting the sources and you're going back to it and verifying what they say, I think it's absolutely fine to try everything. But again, it's up to you. Like, have a play around. You got to see what works for you. I'll show you the way I do it. You might find a way that works for you that's better. To me, it's like going out there and just getting everything it can and then bring it all to me, so then I can go, okay, let's refine this down to what the actual whatever problem is or the answer is or whatever it is, right? So that's the way I kind of think of it, because Yeah, like if you're going to research the ATO or the tax rulings or the legislation, it's going to take you forever. But if it kind of condenses it down so you can quickly understand and figure out a solution, that's the best way, in my opinion. Is ChatGPT versions also different? So I'm just trying to understand the question. Is ChatGPT versions also different the answer to rely on? So I'm guessing you're talking about like version 4 versus 4.0 versus the upcoming 5 and all that kind of stuff, is my assumption from what that question is. And so, yeah, so I find there isn't a lot of difference. So I use the paid version of ChatGPT, but they've got the really expensive one, right? I don't use that. I know there's deep research on ChatGPT now. I know Gemini has deep research as well. I haven't played around with that too much, specifically because I use ChatGPT, and it's like $300 a month for that. But I have played around with the free version, and it does do a lot more research and kind of analyzes information a lot more, and might give you a more specific answer. But for me, the difference between the $30 plan and the $300 plan is negligible. So, I find it's pretty similar. But again, we're not using it to give us all the answers. We're using it to do the research, the initial research, so we still apply our professional judgment. Okay. So the $30 plan, the 4.0, will give you enough of the information that you can come up with a conclusion for your clients. Cool. Doesn't seem like there's any other questions. So let me carry on. So just wrapping this all up. So how can we help you? So obviously for your students in the tax agent program, I'm here whenever you need me. You know how to contact me. But if you're new to the Accounting Academy, checking out what we do, so we do have a lot of practical tax training, right? So we actually try to break it down and make it make sense, rather than just give you a whole lot of theory. So we've got online courses. We help people set up their zero practice managers, and we've also got bite-sized tax tips. So we try to post regularly online and whatnot. This is the first quarterly webinar. So we always start doing free quarterly webinars, totally free. It's free CBD. So yeah, feel free to join us in our future webinars. And we do lots of different things. So if you're interested, you want to keep in touch, you want to see what we're doing in the future, want to see our socials, feel free to scan that QR code and reach out whenever you can or whenever you want to. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.